Hey guys, Frank Allen, your favorite contract corporate pilot, coming to you with another interesting and educational aviation video. Now, before I get started, I need to warn you, viewer discretion is advised. This deals with a very sensitive subject, so please be careful. If you're not comfortable watching these type of videos, don't have any children around. It's not appropriate for them. Now, back on March 25th, 2015, a very tragic event took place in the French Alps. Before I get started, please do me a favor, go over there and hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. It'll remind you each and every time there's a new video. And please leave a respectful comment, be it positive or negative. I'd really like to know what you're thinking. We're trying to get to our goal of 5,000 subscribers. That's my short-term goal. I need you to keep helping me by telling your friends to like and subscribe. I really appreciate all of your help. Now, the mental health issue is a problem all over the world. It's an even bigger problem when it involves aviation. We as pilots are very thoroughly screened, but sometimes things fall through the cracks. It is just part of life. And in this very sad video, we're going to see just exactly what the outcome of that happening was. Let's go to the video and then we'll discuss it at the end.
In the morning of March 24th, 2015, passengers boarded a routine flight from Barcelona, Spain to Düsseldorf, Germany. For many, it was simply the journey home after a vacation. Others were traveling for work. The aircraft was modern. The weather was favorable. Nothing about the departure suggested the flight would become one of the darkest chapters in modern European aviation. Just 40 minutes after takeoff, the Airbus disappeared into the French Alps. There was no mayday, no report of a mechanical failure, and no indication from air traffic control that anything was wrong until it was far too late. What investigators would uncover over the following days would transform aviation safety discussions around the world. This is the story of Germanwings Flight 9525. Germanwings was a low-cost airline owned by the Lufthansa Group. Created to serve short and medium-haul destinations throughout Europe, it connected dozens of cities with an emphasis on affordable travel while operating under the safety standards of one of the world's most respected airline groups. By 2015, millions of passengers had flown aboard Germanwings aircraft without incident. Flight 9525 was scheduled to depart Barcelona El Prat Airport shortly before 10 a.m. local time for the approximately 2-hour journey to Düsseldorf. For everyone boarding that morning, it was expected to be another ordinary flight. The aircraft assigned to the flight was an Airbus A320-211, registration D-AIPX. Delivered in 1991, the aircraft had accumulated nearly 58,000 flight hours and tens of thousands of takeoffs and landings. Throughout its service life, it had been maintained in accordance with European aviation regulations. Investigators would later find no evidence that the airplane suffered a mechanical failure before the accident. The aircraft's engines, flight controls, navigation systems, and structural components were all capable of normal operation. From a technical standpoint, the Airbus was fully airworthy when it departed Barcelona. The flight was operated by two qualified airline pilots. The captain, Patrick Sondenheimer, was an experienced Airbus pilot with more than 6,000 hours of total flight time, including thousands of hours on the A320 family. Seated beside him was First Officer Andreas Lubitz, who had accumulated several hundred hours flying the Airbus A320 after completing Lufthansa's pilot training program. Both pilots were properly licensed and medically certified under European aviation regulations. Nothing observed during the pre-flight preparations indicated that the flight would encounter an emergency. At 10:01 a.m. local time, Flight 9525 departed Barcelona. The Airbus climbed normally toward its assigned cruising altitude of 38,000 feet. Air traffic control communications were routine. The aircraft accelerated smoothly through the climb. Passengers settled into their seats as cabin service preparations began. Weather conditions along the route were favorable. There was no significant turbulence, no thunderstorms, no icing, no reports of technical problems from the flight crew. For the first 30 minutes, the flight progressed exactly as expected. After reaching cruise altitude, the workload in the cockpit decreased considerably. This is one of the quieter phases of any airline flight. The aircraft's autopilot maintains altitude and heading while the crew monitors weather, fuel, and communications with air traffic control. According to the investigation, the atmosphere on the flight deck appeared calm during this portion of the flight. Nothing suggested that Flight 9525 was moments away from becoming an international tragedy. A short time later, the captain left the cockpit, a routine occurrence on long and short flights alike. For several moments, the first officer remained alone at the controls. What happened next would become the central focus of one of the most extensive aviation investigations in European history. Within moments, the aircraft began a controlled descent. At first, nothing about the maneuver appeared unusual to air traffic controllers. But as the seconds passed, one simple question became increasingly urgent. Why was Flight 9525 descending? At approximately 10:30 a.m., Flight 9525 reached its assigned cruising altitude of 38,000 feet. Almost immediately afterward, the aircraft's selected altitude on the autopilot was changed to 100 feet, the lowest value that could be entered into the flight management system. The Airbus responded exactly as it was designed to. The autopilot remained engaged and began a smooth, controlled descent. Nothing about the airplane's behavior suggested a mechanical malfunction. From the outside, the aircraft was simply following the commands it had been given. Inside the cockpit, however, events were unfolding that no one outside the aircraft could see.
As Flight 9525 descended through its assigned altitude, controllers in Marseille noticed something unusual. The aircraft was no longer maintaining its cleared flight level. Air traffic control called the flight several times. There was no response. Controllers tried again. Still nothing. At first, they considered the possibility of a radio failure. Communication problems occasionally occur in aviation, and crews are trained to follow established procedures. But Flight 9525 continued descending without explanation. Radar showed the aircraft steadily losing altitude while remaining on a predictable flight path. There were no abrupt turns, no signs of structural failure, no indication of an emergency maneuver. The silence from the cockpit became increasingly concerning. When the captain attempted to return to the cockpit, he entered the normal access code. The cockpit door did not unlock. Modern cockpit doors are designed to resist forced entry and can be controlled from inside the flight deck. According to the cockpit voice recorder, the captain knocked repeatedly and called for the door to be opened. Receiving no response, the knocking became louder and more urgent. Investigators later determined that the first officer remained at the controls throughout this time. As the descent continued, the sounds outside the cockpit grew increasingly desperate. Eventually, the captain attempted to force the reinforced door open, but it held. The Airbus continued descending at a nearly constant rate. Because the autopilot remained engaged, the airplane stayed stable and fully controllable. There was no evidence of engine failure, no signs of aerodynamic problems. The aircraft continued exactly where it had been commanded to go. As Flight 9525 approached the mountainous terrain near the commune of Prades-Haute-Bléone in southeastern France, the margin for recovery disappeared. Inside the cockpit, terrain warning systems began issuing alerts.
Terrain, 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 pull up.
These warnings are among the most urgent alerts in commercial aviation, designed to prompt an immediate climb away from rising terrain. The warnings continued. The descent did not stop. At 10:41 a.m. local time, Flight 9525 impacted a mountainside at high speed. The aircraft was destroyed instantly. All 150 people on board lost their lives. The crash occurred in a remote section of the French Alps, where steep terrain and limited road access made rescue operations extremely difficult. Within minutes, emergency services, helicopters, and mountain rescue teams were dispatched. As responders reached the site, it quickly became clear that there would be no survivors. The focus shifted from rescue to recovery and to understanding how a modern airliner, operating in good weather, had come to such a devastating end. The investigation was led by France's Bureau of Inquiry and Analysis for Civil Aviation Safety, commonly known as the BEA, with support from German and Spanish authorities, Airbus, Lufthansa, and aviation experts from around the world. One of the first major breakthroughs came when investigators recovered the cockpit voice recorder. Despite extensive damage, the device contained crucial audio from the flight's final minutes. The recording documented routine cockpit conversation before the captain left the flight deck. It also captured the repeated attempts to regain entry, the sounds of increasingly forceful impacts on the cockpit door, and the aircraft's automated terrain warnings. The flight data recorder, recovered several days later, confirmed that the Airbus had remained mechanically capable throughout the descent. The evidence pointed investigators toward a conclusion unlike almost any they had encountered in modern commercial aviation. As investigators analyzed the recovered data, the picture of what happened became clearer. The aircraft had been operating normally. The engines were functioning. The flight controls responded correctly. The weather was not a factor. There was no evidence of a structural failure. The Airbus had not fallen from the sky. It had remained under control throughout the entire descent. The investigation showed that the aircraft followed the commands entered into the flight system, descending steadily toward the mountains while maintaining a stable speed and heading. The tragedy was not caused by the airplane's inability to fly. It was caused by actions taken inside the cockpit. In its final report, the BEA determined that First Officer Andreas Lubitz intentionally changed the autopilot settings to begin the descent while alone in the cockpit. Investigators concluded that he deliberately prevented the captain from re-entering the flight deck and maintained the aircraft's descent until impact. The BEA also examined Lubitz's medical history and found evidence that he had experienced psychological difficulties before the accident.
The investigation revealed failures in the system designed to identify and manage pilot health concerns. At the time, European aviation regulations relied heavily on a pilot's ability to self-report medical issues and on periodic examinations. The accident raised difficult questions. How should airlines balance pilot privacy with passenger safety? How can aviation identify individuals who may be struggling? And how can a system built around trust recognize when that trust is at risk? The loss of Flight 9525 affected people across the world. Among the victims were passengers from 18 different countries, including students, families, and professionals. Memorial services were held in France, Germany, Spain, and beyond. For the families, the tragedy was not just an aviation accident. It was the sudden loss of parents, children, friends, and colleagues.
The investigation focused on improving aviation safety, but the human cost of the accident remained at the center of every discussion. Following the accident, aviation authorities and airlines around the world reviewed cockpit access policies. Many operators temporarily introduced a requirement that 2 authorized people be present on the flight deck whenever possible. However, the industry later recognized that safety solutions needed to address more than just cockpit doors. The accident led to greater attention on pilot mental health support, better communication between medical professionals and aviation authorities, improved systems for identifying serious concerns, a more open culture where pilots can seek help without fear of automatically losing their careers. The goal was not simply to create more rules, it was to create a system where safety, transparency, and support work together. Aviation has always advanced by learning from its tragedies. Every accident leaves behind painful lessons, but those lessons can prevent future loss of life. Germanwings Flight 9525 changed the way the industry thinks about human factors. It demonstrated that aviation safety is not only about aircraft design, maintenance, or technology. It is also about the people operating those machines and the systems created to support them. Modern aviation depends on thousands of layers of protection working together. When one layer fails, another must be strong enough to prevent disaster. On March 24, 2015, 150 people boarded a flight expecting to reach their destination safely. They never arrived. Germanwings Flight 9525 remains one of the most heartbreaking events in aviation history. But from that tragedy came important conversations about pilot support, medical awareness, and the responsibility shared by everyone involved in aviation. The ultimate goal is not only to understand what happened, it is to ensure that those lost are remembered through the safety improvements that followed.
Well, guys, that was a very difficult video for me to produce. I hope that you found it interesting and educational. It is very, very sad that all of those people perished that day for something that could have been avoided by this young man grounding himself and by the mental health care system being different, being able to communicate with the airlines. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And all of those people were victim of his mental health issues. Now, he could have grounded himself. He could have told the airline that he was suffering and they would have helped him to get the mental health he needed. But unfortunately, that was not the case that day. The captain naturally had to go to the bathroom, didn't think anything of it. He pleaded, he pounded on that door. Some reports say that he even used a crash axe to try to access the cockpit. But after 9/11, cockpit doors all over the world were reinforced and even bulletproof. The cockpit is practically impenetrable. So there was no way he could get in there and save all those people. What a sad and frustrating situation. Now, I would ask you all, if anybody out there is suffering from mental health issues, please seek the help of a professional mental health care provider. Now, it's important to note that after this very tragic situation, a lot of things have changed. Just like after every single aircraft accident or incident, things are made better. Unfortunately, this time, again, it was written in blood. Going forward from this day that the accident happened, now they require 2 people in the cockpit at all times. So if the co-pilot or the captain has to use the facilities, then someone has to go into the cockpit, whether it be a relief pilot or a flight attendant. No one can be left alone in the cockpit ever again since this horrible accident. And I'd like to ask you to please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. It'll remind you each and every time there's a new video. And please leave a respectful comment. I'd like to hear what you're thinking, be it positive or negative. And in closing, as I do after each and every video, if you're thinking of getting a pet, please don't go to a breeder, don't go to a pet store, adopt, rescue. There are so many beautiful animals at the rescue organizations, at the shelters, at the pounds, just waiting for their forever home. Every breed, every size, every age. Some of them are there for years. Please, adopt, rescue. I have done it before, and I can tell you that there is no greater love than the love of an animal that you rescued. They are extremely intuitive, and they know that you saved them, and they will show you appreciation and love forever and ever. Your favorite contract corporate pilot, Frank Allo, signing off.